Hello again and welcome back. So now we're going to go over the animal kingdom. Now there are several chapters in the book on the animal kingdom. We're going to start at chapter 32 and I'm going to be throwing in a few things here, there, and everywhere from other chapters as well. So don't go, because there's quite a bit. Now, quite a bit, chunk of the book goes over like all the different organ systems and whatnot, and that's something that honestly we cover in anatomy and physiology because in a lot of cases we usually focus on the mammal end of things, unless you want to go into specialization in another group somewhere else. So just keep that in mind while you're read chapter 32, and then, feel free to peruse chapters 23 through 40 something. I'd have to go look it up. Anyway, so welcome to the animal kingdom. Finally, the last of the kingdoms that we're going to be talking about, and then we're going to move on to ecology after this. And much like the plant kingdom, I'm going to split this into 2 lectures because doing it in one sitting is rough. So that's why we're going to cover the overview in the invertebrates first, and then I'll finish off with the vertebrates, as that's how we split the animal kingdom into 2 groups: the invertebrates who do not have a spine and the vertebrates who do have a spine. And I'll be giving strange stories and explanations as we go along, as usual. So let's go ahead and look at this. So the kingdom Animalia, the animal kingdom, is where we start getting into animals, all the different animals on Earth. And woo, we're a big crazy bunch. So we're not as big as the plant kingdom. Remember, via biomass, plant kingdom still outnumbers us. Via numbers, Protista makes bacteria make us look like nothing. So even though we're kind of the first thing you think about when you think about a life on Earth outside of the plant kingdom, we're not really top dog. Plant kingdom is still top dog. He runs our environment, and without him or her, we would not exist. So as a zoologist myself, you have to give it up to the plant kingdom, even though they tried to wipe us out a couple of times. And then the angiosperm said, no, we can use them. Anyway, so animals are heterotrophs, which means we do not use photosynthesis or chemosynthesis to make our own food. Therefore, we have to, in our body, I said that once and I had a student go, yeah, I make my own food all the time. And I'm like, inside of your body? And he goes, oh, no. I'm like, yeah, in the microwave, yeah, we make our own food, or on the stove, or in the oven. But no, I meant like inside chemically in our body, like plants do. We don't. We have to eat it from the outside. Yeah, sometimes we cook it first, especially as humans, because our digestive system is actually short compared to other omnivores, and that's because we discovered cooking. Cooking actually pre-digests our food for us, so we don't have to have a very long digestive tract, and we can suck the nutrients out of our food faster. So remember, shorter digestive tract means that's why we cook things. Sorry, Liver King. Eating raw is actually not good for our digestive systems. We don't get as much out of it, say, like, our little carnivore friends that we like to live with, like the doggies and the kitties. So anyway, also, animals are mobile, with the exception of one. Remember when I say biology always has these rules, but there's always a but? Yeah, there's a but in the animal kingdom. We'll get to him in a minute. We are multicellular. We're made up of eukaryotic cells. That's why we're in domain eukaryota. We're diploid. So we have 2 copies of our genes in every single one of our cells, with the exception of our reproductive cells, or gametes, which is egg and sperm. We mostly have a sexual reproduction cycle. However, there are some animals that have an asexual one, like sponges. Again, the big fat butt in the animal kingdom, which is the sponges. We're going to talk about them because they break our rules all the way around, but they're in the animal kingdom because they really don't belong in the fungi kingdom. We do not have a cell wall. That's why we had to figure out this thing called exoskeletons and endoskeletons, unless we stay in the water, and jellyfish are just like, skeleton what? I don't need that. We're made up of all sorts of different tissues and organs, and you'll see as we go along, we have body symmetry, We have body segmentation because we have body symmetry. We have an internal body cavity and how we came about that. We're going to talk about that. So we have a body plan, with the exception of jellyfish and sponges. Again, they were sitting there going, I don't need no plan. Weirdos. I'm fine just being a blurb. And they do. And they're fine with that. And we're fine that they do that. So, again, these are the general overviews. Some of these guys like to buck the norm because, why be like everybody else? So again, if you're looking at a cladogram of the animal kingdom, keep in mind we came from, at some point, a single-celled ancestor. Probably current evidence points to probably something out of that was also split out to become the fungi kingdom. So we could be the animal kingdom, could be the sister kingdom to the fungi kingdom. So next time you stare at a mushroom, be like, hey, cuz. And we do have, like I said, there is evidence, but there's also arguing. And that's a good thing. Remember, science is good. We need to argue, have more facts, present them in, a factual manner. And again, we weigh the pros and the cons until some piece of evidence comes along and either makes us, throw that in the trash and we start arguing about that. So keep in mind, more evidence is good. So anyway, eventually we came up with multicellularly, and then we started coming up with different tissues. And the multicellularly is, have multiple cells. The first ones that we see this are definitely the sponges. And this is where you'll start to see big things, these red circles that are going to pop up are the major things that kind of divide us into the major groups. And so one of the first ones is coming up with 2 germ layers. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Coming up with radial symmetry, eventually coming up with segmentation, in other words, having body segments, which led to more fun things, like dancing, and flying. And then we get organs with 3 germ layers, bilateral symmetry, cephalization, where we stick a brain in one end, kind of run everything, whereas sponges and jellyfish are like, brain? What that? And then how we divide our internal organs with the protostome and the deuterostome. And then radial symmetry has no cephalization. Then we get segmentation again. Notice how segmentation arose several different times. Keep in mind that the same ability can still evolve several different times down the road in several different ways. So just because insects and some of the worms, the annelids, came up with segmentation on their own in 2 different we also came up with segmentation a little bit later as well, our own version, so we can dance and do TikTok dances or something like that. I don't know. I don't have TikTok, so I don't know. Anyway, and then eventually a backbone. And that's when we got a whole bunch of cool tricks, which eventually brought us into the fishes. Notice the fish popped out several times because fish are weird like that. Fish are cute. The amphibians, and then reptiles, which gave rise to dinosaurs, which gave rise to birds. So yes, chicken nuggets in the shape of dinosaurs are actually made out of the descendants of dinosaurs. That's just weird to think about. And then mammals, which also kind of popped out of a reptilian line. And we're going to get to some weird stuff. So, let's go ahead and talk about where does this all come from. So, basically, in an animal kingdom, when egg meets sperm, something cool happens. We don't get to turn into a seed. So instead, we have this tube within a tube body plan. And there's also a bag body plan, but that's that's some of the worms, and they're a little weird. They decide to go backwards a bit. But usually, for the most part, if you go back here, you see that 3 germ layers arise. And this is basically 3 layers that eventually turn into all the different organ systems that make us up. And it comes from a blastula. So we get a zygote. So after sperm and egg meet, they merge, or the two protonuclei and seed of each merge in together, and they start going through cleavage. And it goes into 2 cells and 4 cells and 8 cells and 16 cells, and every time they split, that's called cleavage. And it turns into this hollow ball of cells called a blastula. And depending on how the blastula starts to invert, this is where we get the 3 distinct layers that eventually turn into, well, even us. And depending on which end becomes the mouth or which end becomes the anus also becomes a thing. So this end right here. So what happens is the hollow ball cells, and then it pushes itself one side in. Have you ever played with those balls where you just like smush it, and then if you do that, you've basically made a blastula. So one end gets pushed in, and we get 3 layers. We get the endoderm on the outside, the mesoderm in the middle, and the ectoderm, on the outside, the mesoderm in the middle, and the endoderm in here. And eventually this end becomes a mouth, and this end becomes your rear end. But that's only in us. We'll get to that. Some other creatures decide to do it another way. So anyway, those 3 layers, not everyone has all 3. Looking at you, sponges and jellyfish. Actually, sponges don't even have 3. They have 1 because they didn't feel like even doing 2. Jellyfish went to 2. And then eventually everybody settled with 3, and we were all good with it. So the ectoderm, outside, ecto means outside, develops into the outer layer of skin, nervous system, and sense organs like eyeballs. So if you can touch something, thank your ectoderm. Your endoderm, which gets, like I said, the blastula gets inverted. That's the inside. That turns into the lining of our digestive tract, our respiratory system, and other digestive organs. So if you like eating food, thank your endoderm. And then your mesoderm, in the middle of the 2 as it gets inverted, becomes your skeleton, muscles, circulatory system, blood vessels, veins, arteries, and reproductive organs. So in most of the animal kingdom, we have these 3 layers, but there are a couple weirdos that don't. Like I said, sponges just, it's like, yeah, I'm in the animal kingdom, I'm doing my own thing in the corner here, so you can't stop me. And everybody's just like, we're not stopping you, you have fun with that. And the jellyfish are like, I have 2 germ layers. Oh! So these are the 3 germ layers that most of us have, except for the sponges and the jellyfish, because they didn't feel like it. Now, we also have body plans. And this brings us into how do we segment the inside of our body. Like I said, we are a tube within a tube body plan. And you're going to see this over and over and over again. Although it's a little hard to jellyfish, you have to squint a bit. But even with the sponges, you can kind of see this tube within a tube body plan. How do we divide the tube? Well, eventually, when we discovered after the jellyfish that maybe if we came up with a plan for all our internal organs, we could actually do something cool with that. That's where we started going with this. So the first ones we're going to see in the flatworms a little later on after the jellyfish is they're acoelomates, which means they basically have a gut running through, and they have organs in the middle of the layer, and they have an outer layer of skin. And that's about it. So they do have an ectoderm, a mesoderm, and an endoderm, and they have a digestive cavity, which is, again, they're just a tube within a tube. And that's it. That's all they need. They don't really care about anything else, and that's why flatworms are flatworms. They're coelomates. They're a literal tube within a tube. Now, next group up, which are the annelids, mollusks, arthropods, so insects, ectoderms, starfish. No, this is Patrick. And chordates. Are eucoelomates or coelomates. So we got a little bit more definition going on. We've got the ectoderm on the outside, the mesoderm, and we have this coelom. Now, this coelom actually helps all of our organs have a thing. So we have a cavity inside of us, and it's usually filled with, blood and stuff. And then the gut in the middle, and then an organ projecting into the coelom. So, we kind of got a little, coelomates came first, pseudocoelomates came next, which are the roundworms. They decided to get a pseudocoelom, and then we have a full coelom right here, which is basically this big cavity right here, where we have a definition between the outside and the inside, big time, so that way they're not messing with each other. These lead to a lot of going in between, whereas in us, we like to keep everybody separated so they do their jobs efficiently. That's the major part between the coelomates, where everybody's kind of all together. You're a tube within a tube, and it's kind of hard to see all your layers because everything can cross in between. There's no really definition. It's just that's the way. Whereas pseudocoelomates, we're getting some definition there. We're getting some boundaries. Boundaries are healthy. And then the coelomates or the eucoelomates who actually put some boundaries into place so our digestive system isn't really interfering with our circulatory system or our breathing and stuff like that. So we needed more specialization on the inside to support the specialization on the outside. That's what I'm getting at with these different body plans. So again, you're going to see this go from nothing to just weird layers of jellyfish insanity to the coelomates, where they're a tube within a tube, but not much else. The pseudocoelomates, where they're a tube within a tube within a tube, but some boundaries, not a lot. And the eucoelomates, or the coelomates, which later on become our backbone and our gut, and we have definition between all our organ systems, so they're not up in each other's beeswax. Because, it's annoying when everybody's up in each other's beeswax. So, also, because the inside, these different body plans internally also relate to body plans externally. So we have different body plans externally as well, like asymmetrical, which the only one are sponges. Again, they do what they want in the corner. SpongeBob SquarePants is a rebel. And his own little potato in the corner. Anyway, it may be a pineapple under the sea, but they do their own thing. They have irregular asymmetrical symmetry. We're going to see that. They just don't see the point because they're just sitting there going, yeah, who needs symmetry? You're weird. A lot of creatures after the sponges are of radial symmetry. Basically, they look like a wheel around a central axis, like spokes of a bicycle wheel. Most animals with radial symmetry only live in the ocean. The ocean gave rise to radial symmetry, but it doesn't really work on land very well. Which is why when jellyfish wash up on the beach, they're like, ah! And then don't step on them. It hurts. Bilateral, when we finally got up and land and we really had to contend with gravity big time, bilateral was the winner of the day. So we're bilateral. We have two halves. If you split us down the middle, they kind of mirror each other. And a lot of creatures wandering around on land. And then some of them that decided that land was just too crazy and went back into the ocean, like the whales and the cetaceans. Basically, they've got bilateral. So bilateral is a result of us coming up on the land and going, maybe we should have a central organ in control of everybody and telling them what to do, a brain. And, bilateral works really well on dealing with gravity on land. Radial, not so much. So again, if you look at radial symmetry, you can split it into parts like a pizza or a pie. Bilateral symmetry, again, you can only cut it into half. So again, you got the oral side for the radial symmetry and the aboral side for the, oral is the, end where food go in. Aboral is usually where it's attached to something. Again, we've got the foreplanes. We've got the dorsal. I like to think them in the back, dorsal, like the dorsal fin on a dolphin, the ventral, the front. This is my ventral right here. The anterior, again, the front, or where my head is, and the posterior, where the opposite of my head is, my rear end. That's why, you tell people, please sit down on your posterior, especially if you're teaching middle school. So anyway, again, another major term is for all of this, especially with bilateral symmetry, you see this in bilateral, not so much radial, is cephalization, where we decided, we need to put all our sensory structures somewhere we can, have it right next to our nervous system so we can figure out all that data real fast. If you've ever wondered why your eyeballs, your ears, your mouth, your nose is all right next to your brain, it's for processing speed. Whereas the touch just protects the rest of our body and also lets us know where we are in relation to, hearing does that too, that we know up from down. So cephalization, cephalo means head, And we have a greater increase of nervous tissue concentration in the anterior end, the head, and this helps us increase our complexity. So that way we have formed accessory organs for hearing, tasting. Again, we have one place to basically process it all and then tell the rest of the body, hey, you need to be doing this or we die. And if you want to cover all of that, may I suggest taking anatomy and physiology. That's how you learn about how all that goes and how the nervous system tells everybody what's going on. Now, again, I mentioned back when we were talking about our dear friend, the blastoderm, and I was talking about how it inverts. Sometimes that hole at the bottom, depending on what creature you've got, will either become the mouth, that hole at the bottom, or it will become the rear end, the anus. So this is where two words come into the play, and that is deuterostomes and protostomes. Now, we are deuterostomes. When we're a blastula and it inverts like that, we actually make a coelom at the other end, which eventually turns into our head and then our mouth. And that first hole actually becomes our anus. So, yes, you could say at one time, if you're a deuterostome, we were all butts. Some people chose. And protostomes, they did the opposite. Now, how do you tell that? Basically, at the 8-cell stage, when it was splitting, if it has a spiral to it, see how the top 4 are offset from the bottom 4? That is going to turn into where the coelom formation, the blastopore, is going to turn into the mouth. And the anus has to grow at the top. Not all creatures do that. So that was our first round. We decided, hey, there's an opening, we'll make that the mouth, and then we'll grow an anus that way. Sounds great. But for those of us that are deuterostomes, kind of like us, humans are in the deuterostome group, the chordates, actually all chordates. If it has a spine, we're all deuterostomes. So if you've got a spine, you started out as an anus. Isn't that fun? So again, you'll see it's radial and indeterminate. So basically the 4 up top match the 4 at the bottom. You can't really tell if it's spiral like this one. And because of that, we grow a coelom up there. Our coelom starts growing up here. We create our coelom and the blastopore becomes the anus. And again, we have the digestive tooth, the digestive tube. What a digestive tooth. We're not even 2 teeth yet. Goodness. So anyway, so that's a major thing too. You'll notice that mollusks and annelids are basically protostomes. And where the rest of us, like I said, if you've got a spine, you're a deuterostome. So we all started as butts at some point. Now, again, majority of animals, especially when we get into the chordates, those of us with spines, we have major body systems, but the other ones, we're going to see some of these develop over time. Digestion, like I said, that's a natural. We're a tube within a tube. Body plan, digestion's one of the first things that kind of started showing up, especially when you look at the internal body plan. Respiration, lungs, gills, etc. Again, along with pulling in glucose. Oh, goodness. Glucose, we need to combine that with oxygen to make ATP. So therefore, we need respiration. And the bigger you got, you needed to move that oxygen and that ATP and that glucose around, and that's where we get circulation. And we went from open circulation later on into closed circulation. We have closed circulation. Then the nervous system to run everything, because each cell doing its own thing really doesn't work in a cohesive kind of way. Then we got support because we decided, you know what, we need some internal support. And some creatures needed external support, like, insects and spiders and whatnot. Arthropoda isn't in the other ones. Then, of course, what goes in must come out. So you do have excretion. We need to get out anything we don't need, toxins, all that fun jazz. And then last but not least, the only one that you can live without, but the species can't, and that's reproductive systems. Like, you can live without your reproductive system. It's the only system out of all the different systems that make up your body that you can live without. Everything else you cannot live without. Reproductive just means, unfortunately though, we need reproductive to continue the species. So we need it on a species level, but not so much on a personal level. Anyway, so again, the animal kingdom is split between two groups, the backbones and without the backbones. So basically, the backbones are known as the vertebrates, or chordata, whereas the without the backbones are known as invertebrates, or inchordata. So let's go ahead and we start with the invertebrates because they're pretty much where the animal kingdom kind of came out. So we're going to start again with the weirdest weirdo, the sponges. Because these guys just don't even, they don't wanna. For every rule, as I just mentioned earlier, that we basically say, this is in the animal kingdom, these guys are like, nah, I'm not doing that. They are truly the weirdo group of the animal kingdom. However, they've got things that you can actually sit there and look at and say, wow, that's weird, because the fungal cells have these too. Fungi has this too. And again, if you remember from my fungus, I talked about collar cells and flagella. And guess who has collar cells with flagella? Sponges. These guys lack true tissues, organs, mouth, and gut, but they still have kind of a tube and a tube body plan. But they're filter feeders, which is why. So we've got these ostia where they're under, hanging on coral reefs and doing whatever, comes in and they eat plankton. So it's kind of weird, again, watching SpongeBob SquarePants and he should eat plankton. Of course, the more you learn about the ocean, everybody eats plankton, so it's kind of a weird thing. Anyway, and they have on the inside all these little collar cells, and these collar cells not only help the water flow and come out the osculum at the top, but also help with the filter feeding, and basically they just, that's how they eat. They just suck in things and suck out the nutrients, catch them on their collar cells, just like kind of fungi do. Now, these are mostly marine. They're filter feeders, as their water canals are lined with the ciliated flagella. Again, they're called collar cells. They push the water through. They reproduce asexually by budding. So they're sessile. They don't move. That's what sessile means. They don't move. So they actually literally will bud off and it pops down and makes a sponge that's pretty much genetically identical to its buddy. However, they do have larvae that can swim. So this is the one part that it's like, well, how are they even animals if they never move and they bud off and that's about it? They actually do have larvae, and so that way these guys can spread, and that way one group gets wiped out by something, there's a second group down the way, and they didn't get wiped out because they're not all next to each other. Convenient. So yeah, they don't exactly live in a pineapple under the sea, but they do live under the sea, and they are, like I said, weirdos that have, on a cellular level, quite a bit in common with fungi that made us all go, wait a freaking second. So there you go. There's the sponges. Porphyra. They're weird. Next up is the Cnidara, which are the jellyfish. So anemones, corals, and Cnidara, or jellyfish, these finally have true tissues, but they only have two. So they're called diploblastic animals. They only have an ectoderm and an endoderm, so no mesoderm. So they finally went, you know what? We're going to actually organize our tissues. And they do have primitive organs. They do not have a gut nor an anus. They have an incomplete digestive tract. So they decided to, now tube within a tube is not there yet. So we're not the tube within a tube. We've only got 2 layers of tissues. We have primitive organs. We do not have a gut. We do not have an anus. They have an incomplete digestive tract, but they do have really cool stinging cells. And I'm going to show you a video of that in a minute. They have, they're called cnidocytes, and they shoot out cnidae. And these things are what hurts. If you've ever been stung by a jellyfish, this is what stings you. So nematocysts, they have basically it looks like teeny weeny microscopic harpoons, and actually they shoot out insanely fast. Like I have a video that even shows it to you, but also slows it down. It shows it to you under an electron microscope, which is really neat. And it numbs whatever it touches it. Some of these guys are absolutely deadly because of that, like the box jellyfish down in Australia, land of which creatures try to kill you. All of them. I mean, I do not I'd love to visit Australia. And knowing my stupid butt, I'll probably get killed because I'll be like, Steve Irwin and going, whoa, look at this beauty. That would be me. Anyway, and they can be solitary or they can be colonial, like the Portuguese man of war. So this little swim bladder right here, all these little dudes are actually individuals. They're not the same dude. So the Portuguese man of war is usually somebody who's floating around on their own little balloon that they've created, and they have their own separate dudes all living on one little spaceship in the ocean, floating around. And they do. They just float around because of the currents of the ocean. So they just go wherever they flow. They don't really have much of a control over that. However, they do have a two-stage life form. So they have a polyp and a medusa. The medusa is the one we know. So when you see jellyfish floating around and doing that cool stuff, that's the medusa life stage. So that's the medusa life stage, and then they have a polyp life stage. The polyp life stage basically is kind of like almost like alternate generations in a plant kingdom, but not quite. So what happens is the medusa, there are male and female medusas floating around, and one will release an egg and the other one will release sperm, and it will make a larva. Then that larva goes and plants itself, and then it grows all these little buds off that become and pop off. And actually some of these, it shows it like on the inside. Some of them actually are like layers of them, and they just pop off at the end and go into their medusa life stage. So they have sessile a lot like sponges in the polyp life stage, but they also have the free-floating, wandering around eating things, medusa life stage. And we usually, when we think of jellyfish, we think of the medusa life stage. And some of these guys are amazing in the fact that there's actually some of these in the medusa life stage have actually merged with photosynthetic cells. And there's sun jellyfish in this one lake, and they don't let you in the lake anymore. I believe it's in Africa. And they literally just follow the sun and then go back down and then come back up when the sun rises and follow the sun. So they're actually hybrids. They're separate, but they live with photosynthetic creatures living inside of them that makes all the food for them. And they don't sting. They don't have stingers. But they're really delicate, so we don't let just anybody willy-nilly jump in with them and go, I love you, because they're really... A lot of jellyfish are very delicate, even though some of them are insanely deadly. And some of them actually eat each other. Like there's jellyfish that go and eat corals. There's anemones that eat jellyfish. So this entire group is just nuts because they'll eat each other. So jellyfish are just neat. So again, simple, only two tissues, which is called diploblastic. They only have the ectoderm and the endoderm. They don't have that tube within a tube body plan yet. So we're not there yet. We haven't completely organized. We've somewhat organized. But it's worked for them for billions of years, so who's to say they're wrong, I mean, they just said, why? I don't want to be complicated. I want to be simple and free. And so they are. Again, jellyfish are interesting. There's some that actually have lights. There's one called the... eternal or the immortal jellyfish, where it just the medusas will actually just pop off of each other, not with the polyp form. Like if it dies, it just pops a new medusa off of it and it just keeps going. So it's called the immortal jellyfish. Look it up. It's interesting. These guys are weird. They're because they're so simple, they can get away with some things that we can't, which is really neat. Nope. Again, this is how do jellyfish sting. Really cool. Nope. Oh, man. All right, I'll try to figure out a way to post this. I have fixed this video a gazillion different times, and you can watch it on YouTube, but you can't watch it when you put it into a thing. This shows the Nadaria shooting. I'll give you the link in the thing, in the my courses. It's annoying, but it's really fun, because it's like you blink and you miss it. It's kind of neat. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Finally, we get to, hey, let's have 3 layers of germ cells. So, finally, let's go to the flatworms, or platyhelminthes. Platyhelminthes, excuse me. I know how to say this. So this includes planarians, flukes, tapeworms, and ribbon worms. And these guys are weird. Again, I'm going to say this a lot. But we finally have 3 layers. We have an ectoderm, a mesoderm, and an endoderm. We also have discovered the tube within a tube body plan. So these are coelomates. They do not possess a true body cavity, but we've got a digestive tract. And we also have some of the beginnings of a nervous system. And you see that in the planarians. Planarians are freaks. These are the ones you can cut in half and they can literally grow back every which way. So like this guy that you just cut in half right here, he will grow a new head and this one will grow a new tail. Takes a few weeks, but yeah, they're fun to do. They're hard to cut though. They run around like crazy. They're just absolute mad creatures. They're also gorgeous, especially some of these flatworms. Unfortunately, though, they're both male and female. And the crazy part is, instead of mating, they fight each other. They literally fight each other to not get pregnant. And I have a video on that a little later on. So they actually they have a 2-pronged penis, and they'll actually fence with it. And whoever gets stabbed gets instantly fertilized. So they literally fight each other to get your opponent pregnant. That would be weird in our dating, wouldn't that? I mean, that would, oh my God, can you imagine? It's like, we've got to fight and figure out, the loser gets to be pregnant. Anyway, another disturbing thing, tapeworms. So this is a tapeworm that was taken out of a human being. Fun. Strangely enough, back in Edwardian and Victorian era, it actually was a diet trick. You'd eat tapeworm eggs, and supposedly you'd lose weight. Yeah, because they would be eating you from the inside out. Not a good idea. Don't do it. It is not. If that becomes the next TikTok diet trend, don't do it. Don't do it. It is bad. They can get huge. Yeah, not so great. So remember, leave tapeworms somewhere else. And if your pets have tapeworms, get them wormed. Get them dewormed. So these guys, like I said, really interesting bunch. Really interesting bunch. Again, finally we're getting some body plan here, but not a lot. And we're getting to see more interesting adaptations. So also, if you've seen these planarians, these crazy long ones with the heads, kill them. They are very invasive. So they're yellow. They've been found in gardens around here, especially in South Carolina. Kill them. They're an extremely invasive species, and they will destroy a lot of what's going on in our flora and fauna. They are no good. So if you see a really long, like flat wormy thing that's yellow with like an arrow-shaped head, murderize it. They no good. They bad. They from another continent, and they should not be in North America, and they need to be like Bradford pears. So again, this shows you the planarians. If you cut the planarians in half, it actually shows you how these guys grow back. It's actually insane. Again, I will post these. Highly recommend you watch them. They're just fun. This is the flatworms and how they mate. It was definitely part of one of the BBC Earth series, except it was called The Mating Game. So these are peacock flatworms. They're in the ocean, but yeah, it makes our version of dating look like nothing. Just saying. I'll also post it. It's just. I'm just glad we're not. This is a doctor going over the old tapeworm diet. Like I said, this actually was a real thing back in Edwardian and Victorian times. Highly recommend you know. There are different tapeworms you can get. Our current head of the health administration of this country had a worm eat part of his brain. And yeah. Just saying, that worm's part of this group.
I've seen
So just FYI, if eating tapeworm eggs ever becomes another one of the diet fads, again, you know how everything kind of comes around in time and stuff. Yeah, don't, no. Just don't. Just don't. Just don't. Alright, finally, we're getting to more body organization. So now we're hitting the roundworms. Now, roundworms are crazy in that they are one of the most numerous animals in the animal kingdom on Earth. They actually put insects to shame, and insects put us to shame. So these guys are insanely numerous, and a lot of them are actually really important to farm soil and whatnot. They're very specialized, and they're everywhere, and they're even in weird places. One of species is literally, there's a German species. It only lives in the cardboard coasters used in German pubs. That's the only place it's found. Why? I don't know. They like German beer, I guess. Works for them. We have found some of these guys frozen in Antarctica. We have found them under, like, we dug down, like, took core samples, not the core of the Earth, but we went down. Still found these guys. These guys are everywhere. Like I said, they're the most numerous in the animal kingdom. They're everywhere. A lot of them, we like them. They don't bug us. We don't bug them. It's all good. We're friends with them. They're friends with us. However, there's some of them, like heartworm, that we hate. So anyway, they're freshwater, marine, terrestrial, parasitic. Some of them are parasitic, like heartworms. They have a complete digestive tract with a cloaca, which is actually an opening for several systems on these guys. And they're pseudocoelomates. So they have a fluid-filled body cavity, which is called a pseudocoelom. It's not entirely lined by the mesoderm like ours is. So they have a false coelom. It has no peritoneal lining. Again, they've got some boundaries between their bits on the inside, but not as many as we coelomates will later on down the road. They actually have simple muscles. And roundworms, like I said, they're some of the most abundant of the creatures on this planet. They're all over the place. However, like I said, when they're infectious, they're bad. So heartworms, this is a dog heart, and it is absolutely chock full of heartworms. This is what, if you don't give your dog heart or cat heartworm medication, this is literally what their heart turns into. And it's really easy to prevent, which makes me kind of go, but at the same time, it's, you know, it will kill your animal eventually, because these heartworms just basically fill in and eat all the food coming out of the blood, you know, being carried by the blood system. So, you know, they all coagulate in the heart, and eventually the heart gets so chock full of all these worms, it can't push blood around anymore, or efficiently, because it's chock full of worms. And all the openings are being held open, and it's not pushing the blood around anymore, and your dog will die of a heart attack. So, like I said, nematoda, we like them. We like them a lot. They help us a lot with soil and keeping the soil healthy and all that fun jazz. In some cases, unfortunately, they'll kill your dog. So it's a give or take with these guys. They also, when they die, they actually flash this blue light and then they die. It's weird. We're not even sure why they do that. They're just weird like that. So some of them will actually, when they die, they go, wah! And they explode into blue color, and then they're dead. So we found that, and we went, that's weird. Can you imagine? Yeah, so this is a guy who actually studies them at Duke University, and he goes over 5 fun facts about roundworms. And like I said, one of them is they actually, when they die, they just give off blue light, and then they're dead. We don't know why. It is weird. Here's another one, just going over all these different guys and why they're really important. They're extremely important in freshwater systems. Like I said, they're also very important in keeping our soil healthy. So we like roundworms for the most part, with the exception of the heartworm that can go dork right off, in my opinion. Kind of like mosquitoes, they can dork right off too. Now, let's get into the weird foots. So, finally, we have coelomates. We have body plans. We have big-time body plans. So, these guys are marine, freshwater, and terrestrial. They have soft bodies in a shell for the most part. Some of them don't. Snails, bivalves, squids, and slugs. Now, Bivalves and squids are almost like just completely in their own category in the fact that they have almost an alien intelligence compared to ours. They decided to spread their nervous system out instead of keeping it all in one place, and because of that, they're insanely intelligent. Squids and octopi are just absolutely insanely intelligent. They know how to unscrew jars from the inside. They have figured out entire if you have a whole maze, you can teach them tricks and stuff, and they'll figure it out and they'll learn it. They're actually it's some of them, like some squids will actually come up to divers, steal things off the diver, look at it, and then give it back or run off with it, depending on their mood that day. So these guys, don't put it past them. You look at a snail and a slug, and you're like, bleh. But squids and octopi, oh my god, these guys are insanely intelligent. So don't diss them. Snails and squids, snails and slugs on the other hand, especially I hate slugs. They keep eating my peppers, and I don't like that. So these guys are coelomates. Finally, we have the coelomates. We have a true coelom with a fluid-filled body cavity completely lined by the mesoderm. This cavity provides space for all the different organs to develop and function, and it acts as a hydrostatic skeleton aiding in movement for these guys. So they don't really have a skeleton. Some of them have a shell, but that's not really a skeleton. They have a hydrostatic skeleton. So this gives them space to force their fluids around to act like a countercurrent for moving around underwater. Bivalve means two valves, and you see that in a lot of some of clams and whatnot. They're bivalves. Some of them have a foot used for locomotion. Snails and slugs are gastropods, so they literally run around on pretty much their stomach, kind of. They also have a cool thing. They have a rasping tongue called a radula, so when they're unfortunately on my freaking pepper plants and eating them before the pepper plants can be matured. And I've tried beer, and I've tried diatomaceous earth. Little jerks. I've tried, cheap beer, and I've gotten a few, but not enough. And then I tried expensive beer just to see if they, because they're so close to Asheville, if they're just, hoity-toity slugs. But slugs and snails, they have this radula. Test question, a wink test question. Again, it's a kind of a rasping tongue organ. They use it to basically rip up their food and then eat it. And then Miss Royal cries in her garden because they're eating her pepper plants. Slugs! So anyway. Squid and octopi are known as cephalopods, which means head foot. Again, some of these guys are, you could just go on and on and on. I'm trying to touch and go, so I'm not sitting there and beating about the bush, but some of these guys are some of the most fascinating, interesting, and curious creatures there is. So, we gotta love them. Alright, segmented worms, or annelida. So finally we've discovered segments. So not only are we coelomates, in other words, we have a true body plan going on, but because we have a true body plan going on, we also can start segmenting. So this is the first time we've seen segmenting, and we're going to see it again because another set of creatures, again, unrelated, sort of, kind of. These guys went off one way, and the insects went off in a different way, but they both came to the same conclusion that segmenting your body equals we can do more things. So this includes earthworms, tube worms, and leeches. They're marine, freshwater, and terrestrial. They have a linear body fused with segments. And again, they're coelomates. So we have a true coelom right here, as you can see. Now, earthworms are interesting because they are basically both male and female together. So they're hermaphrodites, true hermaphrodites. And when they mate, they actually glue each other together for 3 hours and exchange sperm sacs. So, yeah. It's like you walk up to another, if you're a segment earthworm, and you go, hey, you want to glue ourselves together for 3 hours? And the other one goes, eh. Leeches are interesting. Again, they basically, one end attaches and starts actually releasing an anticoagulant, and then starts sucking your blood. And then when they're full, they pop off. We actually use them still. Once upon a time, we used to use them for bloodletting. That really did anything. But nowadays, we use it for when we have to reattach fingers and hands and arms. Literally, if we can get it to the ER fast enough and get it to a doctor fast enough, we can reattach it. And a lot of hospitals have leech labs where they grow and keep leeches for this, just for this. Because the anticoagulant they inject is so good that we have it, but at the same time, the way they inject it, it's just perfect. So that way all the little capillaries don't clot up, and the finger can reattach, or the hand can reattach. So a lot of times we use this for reattaching things. So we actually still use leeches in medical. And I think I had one student that told me that, yeah, she used to have to go in and feed the leeches, not stick her hand in and they suck blood. No. They actually did it in another way. But leeches are actually still used today in medical fields for reattaching things. So, because they do a really good job of making sure everything's, there's no, blood clots that would kill, you can't just take a finger and go, and, you've got to realign a whole bunch of stuff, and blood clots because the body's like, I've been damaged, I must clot to stop the bleeding. Well, these guys, and the way they do it, they get a free meal, we get their anticoagulant, and there's no blood clots, and hopefully your finger lives and you still have a finger or a hand or a foot. So thank you, leeches. We still use you, even though they're creepy. Again, here's Hank. He's going to go over the simple animals. Definite watch.
You and I both.
All right. Now for the last bunch. Again, this is the most successful animal phylum. So where the roundworms are pretty much everywhere, these guys are the most successful. These are the guys that pretty much, after the plant kingdom figured out how to tame the land, this was the first bunch that got up pretty much out of the ocean and said, oh, cool. That's why they're some of the most successful animal phylum. And they used to be huge. Because there was so much oxygen in the atmosphere back when the plant kingdom ruled the earth and nobody else, and these guys decided to start coming on up, these guys could grow to insane sizes. So imagine a, 3-foot dragonfly, and you're about close to, if we got off the bus and if Miss Royal's magic school bus, and we got off at that time, oh boy, there'd be some big bugs walking around. I don't know if I'd want to. That sounds like a really good premise for a horror movie. Ooh. Jurassic Park move over, giant bugs. Anyway, so, this is Arthropoda, spiders, scorpions, insects, crabs, and shrimp, although they're in separate groups. Spiders and scorpions. Scorpions are actually pretty much where a lot of insects came out of. Modern scorpions, no. But sea scorpions and whatnot, and they started over and over again. Sea scorpions are a really interesting bunch, but basically that's where a lot of arthropoda came from, out of the ocean, with sea scorpions. And sea scorpions were blasted into oblivion during a couple of die-offs, and they came back because the body shape works. So once again, physics and Mother Nature came together to give us different layers of sea scorpions at different times, because it's a body shape that works, especially in the ocean, and then more so up on the land. So then we got insects later on, and crabs and shrimp. Now, interestingly enough, crabs, sometimes, depending on the crab, it gets shoved in with the spider group, and sometimes not. So spiders and scorpions are in their own group. And then insects are separate. Crabs are separate currently, but somebody's been advocating for shoving the crabs back in with the spiders and the scorpions, and there's a lot of people going no. And shrimps are just hanging out and being shrimpy, I guess. Anyway, they're found in nearly every habitat on this planet. They are everywhere because they have a segmented body, which gave a rise to different specialized parts. So they have legs, they have pedipalps, in spider sense that give a rise to their spinnerets, so they can make webs and whatnot. They have a 2 body plan here. We've got, the the cephalothorax, which contains the brains, jaws, eyes, stomach, and leg attachments. And then you've got the abdomen right here, which contains the guts, heart, and reproductive organs, and the silk glands. Really fun. I went up and studied with a doctorate in spiders, and it was just a really fun couple of weeks learning about all sorts of different spiders that live all over the place around here. Another thing around here is, again, insects, though, they've got the 3 segments, whereas spiders and scorpions have the 2. They're coelomates, again, with specialization parts like antenna chelicerae, so that's what the body segmentation. Some of them got wings and said, look, I can fly. They have antenna, they have mouth parts, they have, check out the horned beetles and the stag beetles. They went crazy with their body segmentation. They're like, if we can figure it out, we are going to grow it, and they did. So they just went wild with this body segmentation. Another fun thing is they came up with compound eyes, which is basically like our eyeball, except now you've got 1,001 ball. And there's a trade-off for that. Like, ours are very adaptive. Theirs are extremely adaptive too, but they can't focus like we can. So it's kind of an interesting thing how their eyes and our eyes, or their compound eyes and our eyes, differ. So again, another thing where eyes developed separately at 2 different times, or actually many different times, because like I said, even sea scorpions got wiped out and then came back, and then wiped out and then came back, and then wiped out and then came back. Keep in mind, evolutionary time, sometimes a certain body plan is just so good, it just keeps coming back. Again, coevolution. So again, eyes evolved separately. Insects went in one way and we went in a completely separate way. So again, also ants are all over the place. There's South American ants that are actually taking over the world. Kind of fun if you want to know more about that. So I have this video here called The Ant Mega Colony, and it's actually kind of the biggest war on Earth. We think we humans are the kings and queens of war. No, ants have been warring. Well, first bacteria and viruses have been warring since bacteria and viruses, and then now definitely ants. Ants are always, different types of ants are always fighting with other different types of ants. It's actually really fascinating. So if you want to have fun with war, maybe you should study ants. Ants are weird. In kind of a weird way. All right, and the last group we're going to talk about before I cut it off and we talk about the vertebrates is the sea stars, sea urchins, and sand dollars, or echinoderma. So these are marine. Again, they process spiny calcareous skeletons. This is the last bunch we're going to see with radial symmetry. Everybody else from here on out, as soon as you get a spine, we're bilateral. And they have a water vascular system and tube feet to move. And if you've ever gone to an aquarium and picked one up, you've probably felt all the little tube feet going blah, 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 blah. And they actually taste you as they walk. Can you imagine? You walk over something at the same time you're also tasting it. Yummy. So, yes, if you pick up a Patrick, make sure it's not the spiny type that can hurt you, but they're also tasting you. Yummy. They're just weird. Urchins are fun. Interestingly enough, urchins can be really bad. We actually have to do, there are some places, like off the coast of California, where we have to actually go diving for urchins, because we put a dent in the, not the sea lions, what is it? My brain just exploded. Little fuzzy dudes, they're so cute. Oh, it will come to me at some point. And I'm sure my future self is flashing it up here. Anyway, but sometimes we have to go in. We can eat sea urchins. You can crack them open and eat them. Fish like to eat them if you crack them open. We sometimes have to go through and kill them because they'll eat all, if there's an explosion of these guys, they will eat all our kelp forests, and kelp forests underwater actually keep our oceans very, very clean and happy and wonderful and give places for us to live. So we don't want all the sea urchins to eat all our kelp forests, because then underwater becomes a desert underwater and it's not good. So, otters. Oh my god. Duh. So sea otters love eating these guys. They're really good at it. So they'll go down and crack them open. Sea otters actually like to carry around a rock. They have a favorite rock. I know, isn't that amazing? They have a favorite rock, and they'll carry it around, and they'll use it to smash open sea urchins. So, fun things, fun things. So these guys are wild and weird too. Again, you could sit there and talk about these guys all day. Some of the Patricks you can pick up, some of them don't touch. But I'm not going to go too crazy on these guys. All right, with that said, again, Hank talks about the complex animals, usually the insects, and then our buddies, the sea stars, and Patrick and whatnot. Hello, this is Patrick. So from here...
Hi there, just hang...
We're going to stop, and now that we've covered the invertebrates, the next lecture we're going to cover the wild and crazy land of those of us with spines. So join me in the next lecture where we talk about the vertebrates and us. So until then, have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.